for Fairfax County Police Department. We are so excited that you could join us this morning. We are here to officially roll out our body-worn camera pilot program, and we do want to recognize County Executive Brian Hill, who's here in the room with us, as well as Deputy County Executive of Public Safety, Dave Rohr, who is also joining us this morning. We appreciate you all being here. Chief Rossler is going to go over this body-worn camera pilot program and what we can expect to see. Captain Chantel Cochran was heavily involved in the development of the policy, so she will outline that for us. And then you'll hear from Major Christian Quinn, who is overseeing the rollout of our pilot program, and he will also show you all how the cameras actually work. So, Chief Rossler.
Thank you, Emily. Good morning. We are excited to announce the rollout of our body-worn camera pilot program, which begins Monday the 19th. In the summer of 2014, a committee of regional officers, community stakeholders, helped the Fairfax County Police Department develop a model policy based upon nationwide best practices. In June of 2015, as Chief of Police, staff and I presented to the Board of Supervisors a full body-worn camera program. At that time, the startup cost was estimated at $8 million with a recurring cost of $4 million. The Police Ad Hoc Commission produced its final report and recommended that the police department have body-worn cameras. In December of 2016, at the Public Safety Committee meeting, I proposed to the Board of Supervisors that we use the request for proposal process to conduct a pilot project on body-worn cameras. Since 2014, there have been many technology changes, many vendors that have come online with body-worn cameras, and to make a more informed decision, the request for proposal process leading to this pilot project is to understand the impact of body-worn cameras from many different perspectives. Since 2016, we have engaged community stakeholders such as President Kofi Annan of the NAACP, who is here with us today, to produce sound policies for the use of body-worn cameras in our community. Other stakeholders include mental health advocates and other services in the community where people suffer crisis, and we need to make a more informed decision as to how we turn the cameras on and off to protect privacy rights in the community. Before we transition to an overview of the body-worn camera policies and the operations of the cameras, we must understand the following facts. This is a pilot program, and it's designed to understand the scope of cost, how the policy works, the staffing needed to run a full-time program, and to study whether or not body-worn cameras have a reduction on complaints on police officers and a reduction in the use of force deployment in the community. The American University is conducting a study of our body-worn camera pilot project. They are looking at the police department before implementation of the pilot project, during the pilot project, and after, to understand whether or not body-worn cameras make a difference in the community and for our police officers. We are conducting this study with the highest of academic rigor to make sure we can have an informed decision later on this fall. We chose 3 district stations to conduct this pilot project. Those are the Mount Vernon District Station, the Mason District Station, and the Reston District Station. These 3 stations provide unique opportunities to understand the impact of body-worn cameras. First of all, each of these district stations contain very diverse communities, diverse urban environments, and also these district stations, the facility themselves, have the ready-to-go IT infrastructure so we could reduce cost impact for the pilot project. We have designed a testing environment where patrol officers and other operationally uniformed officers will wear body-worn cameras in a controlled fashion for the purpose of the study, again with the highest levels of academic rigor to validate the impacts. I must inform everyone that school resource officers shall not be part of the pilot project. However, if there's a call for service in a school where a patrol officer that is part of the pilot project responds in as a backup officer, the body-worn camera policy shall be in effect. Additionally, any officer that is part of the pilot project that works off-duty at a school event, such as a sporting event that is part of the pilot project, they shall be wearing their camera at that event. And again, during school hours, the SROs, the school resource officers, shall not be equipped with cameras. If an SRO is off and we have to backfill that position, that person that backfills the school resource officer position will not be wearing a camera. However, should the Board of Supervisors approve a permanent body-worn camera program, we will work with the school leadership and the Board of Supervisors to revisit the issue of cameras on school resource officers. We also have an in-car video system that has been around for over a decade. We now have a civilian review panel, a police auditor, and we are transparent with our internal affairs investigations with the community. So I must caution everyone that body-worn cameras only provide one point of view. They do not solve everything. They do help us with accountability of our actions in the community and build confidence and trust from the community in our police department. I support body-worn cameras, and I believe this pilot project will help all of us make the most informed decision moving forward as to whether or not body-worn cameras will be effective in our community. Full implementation of the body-worn camera pilot project will be March 13th, and there are 230 cameras that we have to deploy. So now I'm going to turn it over for an overview of how we developed our policy, and Captain Chantel Corcoran is going to talk about that. Chantel?
Thank you, Chief. Good morning. My name is Chantel Cochran, and I am the District Commander of Fairfax District Station. In 2017, I was requested to develop a policy for the body-worn camera for Fairfax County Police. I decided to go ahead and utilize the DCJS, Department of Criminal Justice Services model policy, and take our current in-car video policy and kind of combine them to develop this policy, kind of create a framework. And after we established a very good framework, we worked with the community stakeholders. Well over 30 were invited to help us to develop, kind of tweak the policy to make it a really good balance between the privacy concerns of our citizens and the safety concerns of both citizens and officers. So the policy really is in place to guide the officers in their day-to-day use of the body-worn camera. It addresses such things as when to record, when not to record. And the Chief spoke very well on the SROs not being assigned body-worn cameras, but when officers do respond for any legitimate law enforcement reasons at the school grounds, they will be utilizing that. Another example is if a citizen wants to make a report to the officers, they want to report a crime, and they choose to be anonymous, officers will stop recording. In most cases, we're asking officers to record. Outside of the things that we have prohibited them from using the body-worn camera, their interactions with citizens will be recorded. And I believe that this is a very strong and fair policy, and I think that the officers will treat it as a tool to use, just like all the other tools that they have available to them, but it's also going to give the citizens the transparency and the accountability that they desire. We'll wait till questions at the end, and I'm going to turn it over to Major Quinn so that he can discuss some of the more fine details of the body-worn camera itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Cochran. I'm Major Christian Quinn. I serve as the commander of the Cyber and Forensics Bureau. With respect to body-worn cameras, I chaired the selection advisory committee that allowed us to arrive at the decision to go with Axon as our vendor. Very competitive process, a lot of interest, very big space with respect to the number of providers out there, but I think we've got a good solution for our agency. As you know, the pilot was approved for a period of 90 to 180 days. It's likely to be 180 days to allow us to gather as much data as we can, allow our workforce to get as much time with the devices as they can, and give us feedback with respect to how effective they are, how they work, give our community members a chance to weigh in on the perceived legitimacy and the effects, and have our partners at American University look at what effects the cameras have in the community. So, as we mentioned, the policy mirrors that of our in-car video, and the majority of the folks in the pilot program who are going to get these devices, and I'll go through the methodology with respect to deploying those, a lot of these people are already working with in-car video, so they're very accustomed to, one, maintaining the equipment, two, adhering to the policies and rules as pertains to digital video evidence. So we don't anticipate too many challenges there. As you know, we have officers from the Reston District Station, Mount Vernon District Station, Mason District Station, and then also some traffic division officers, our motor units, and our animal protection police. So the methodology, our patrol schedule is an A-B configuration, meaning our folks work about 11.5 hours, which means half of them are working on the A side when the other half are off on the B side. So conveniently, that lends itself to a good research methodology. So you're going to not have everybody at every district station with cameras. Half the officers are going to have them, the patrol officers that is, the neighborhood patrol units will have them, our bike teams if you will, and half of our patrol officers will not have them. And what that's going to allow is officers who work the same district, the same hours of the day, serving the same community. We can look at a side-by-side comparison of those folks at the end of the pilot period and look at what effect, if any, what differences exist between those two groups. And we can go into that a little bit later in the presentation as well. Getting into the device itself, we've got the Axon Body 2. They do make some other configurations. I'm going to turn it on for you. You'll hear an audible beep. So the vibration there is a silent cue to the wearer that their device is on. It's got a mic, lens. The device is very light. It's only about 5 ounces with the mount. It's got multiple mounts, so you can see that I'm wearing it on the outside of a uniform shirt. It's got magnetic mounts, clips. It will work with a jacket, work with our motor units, their leather coats. It'll work with our exterior vests. So it's pretty configurable based on your role in the agency. It's got a pre-record buffer. So while it's powered on, and I'll turn it on for you, very basic, big button function, not a lot to confuse there. It's going to come on. Maybe. All right. So the device is functioning. See the battery indicator? So as the device is recording, when I activate it, it begins recording audio. For 30 seconds prior, there's a pre-record buffer. So anything that was in view of the camera for 30 seconds prior is added to the beginning of the footage. And what that's for is that feature is, and it's the same feature, same configuration we have for our in-car video. So if an officer is suddenly taken by surprise, has to take action, they activate their camera, and it rolls back about 30 seconds, well, 30 seconds from the time it's activated. What bears noting is that it's only video. The audio doesn't start until the moment that the record is activated. Officers will amass video during the course of their shift. They have a means to tag the video. We're looking at integration with our CAD system to make it easier to geolocate, tag the video by date, time, tag the video by our internal event number. Officer finishes their shift, takes the device off, comes off of the magnetic mount, goes into the docking station. This also, single device, so the device would be offloading the digital video evidence, goes up to the server. The device is also recharging during this period as well. So officer comes in for their shift the next day, they retrieve the device, place it back on whatever mount they're using that day, and every officer who's issued a camera will have multiple mounts to choose from. So, and this will give you a chance to take a look at afterward. Obviously it's inert because it's not plugged in right now, but it's we've got multiple docking stations mounted at all of our district stations. and we've got docking stations issued to our motor units and our animal protection police. So that is basically how the data gets off of the device onto our server. Can then be shared, can then be used for evidentiary purposes, etc. So we are excited to see, really to showcase. We know our officers are out there doing good work, and I think this is going to give the community and all of you a good first-person glimpse of the type of work that they're doing out there. So I'm going to turn it back over to Colonel Rossler for questions and further discussion.
I'll ask for our American University representative and President Annan to join me in case there's questions concerning the study and the policy, because they are subject matter experts from the community and the academic world. So are there any questions?
Yeah, Chief, what can happen to an officer who blatantly disregards the policy? If there's an incident, they purposely don't turn on the camera, they erase video, what kind of repercussions will officers face if they fail to follow your direction?
Great question. This is an active policy. It's signed off by me. If an officer intentionally violates this policy, an internal affairs investigation will then be started, and they will be held accountable and subject to progressive discipline. And I'm not going to tolerate any violation of this policy, just like I wouldn't tolerate any other violation of any other policy. And it's critical that we not have replication of other agencies that we looked at that had studies where officers were not held accountable to the policy. It's critical that I, as your chief, hold everybody accountable at all times, whether it's a pilot project or the real deal. This is the real deal during a pilot project, and it's effective. It's no different. Yes?
If there is a body-worn camera video that's of high community interest, how are you going to make decisions about how and when to release it? I'm thinking about the decision made recently with the, in-car parkway accident. So how are you going to assess that?
As you know, over the course of the last few years, I've made it my commitment to the community, the Board of Supervisors, their commitment together to be more transparent. So the decisions that I have made in the past on the release of videos are the practice. When the video is no longer of value of evidence, it won't hinder the investigation, I will release it. Yes, sir.
So Chief, in terms of your policy, you went to stakeholders within the community. Why did you do that instead of, say, going to other agencies like maybe the FBI or the law enforcement to come up with policies because they have already dealt with this type of situation?
The Fairfax County Police Department has always been a national leader since its inception in 1940, and we participate on many different levels, the state, federal, national, international level. As I mentioned earlier, we looked at best practices around the country of same-size agencies and much larger departments. And the conclusion I have professionally drawn on looking at body-worn cameras across this country, unfortunately, a lot of large agencies had a horrific event in the community, and the quick reaction was to equip all the officers with body-worn cameras, and the chief or the sheriff would then go out and do this large purchase and just roll them out without thought to policies, privacy, cost impact, and just managing the entire program. That's why we did the request for proposal process. Now, using community members is critical for any police department in this country to make sure we meet their expectations and that they have ownership of their police department. I call that the co-production of policing, which is a big theory, but I think it's best maybe for President Kofi Annan from the NAACP to talk about his experience, not only with the body-worn camera project, but working with his police department.
Yeah, so I have to echo those sentiments that Chief Rossler just stated, and we do appreciate being included into the drafting of the policy from the very beginning, and I think that's absolutely the right way to go. And I have to say, working with Chantel over here was an absolute pleasure. From inception to now, the policy has changed a lot. I mean, and I would say that it's gone from really being a policy that was written for cops by cops to being one that includes concerns from the community as far as things like releasability and how it's operate. So I do think that it's very important to make sure that the community was involved, and especially from the minority community, which has traditionally, not just here in Fairfax, but across the nation, has had a lot of concerns with regards to the trust. And so this is a really good opportunity for us to participate in the process to help shore up that trust by helping to bolster the transparency portion of that factors into the police trust.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Could you talk just a little bit more about, you mentioned that you chose the stations that you did to find some that reflect a lot of diversity. Can you tell me why that was important, or expand on that a little bit?
Sure. From the academic perspective, that's critical, that we understand whether or not the body-worn cameras have an impact on use of force, deployment, complaints against officers. Does it change behavior? So I'm going to turn it over to Professor Brad Bartholomew from American University to kind of give you an overview of the full answer to your question.
Thank you, Chief. Morning. So just to reiterate what the Chief was talking about just a second ago, we are looking at a few different outcomes related to the issuance of police services and also police and citizen perceptions. So they generally fall into three areas. The first being police perceptions as to how they think the introduction of these body cameras will affect the day-to-day job, but also interactions with the public. Second, we are going to look at the impact of police cameras on not only citizen perceptions, which is very important, but more specifically, perceptions of citizens who have had recent interaction with police. So we want to see if the introduction of body-worn cameras has any impact on their sense of police legitimacy. And then finally, we'll also be looking at various indicators related to delivery of police services. So like the Chief was saying, we are very interested to see if use of force goes up or down after the introduction of the cameras, and also citizen complaints, but we will also be looking at other aspects such as citations written, more mundane and common police practices, to see whether or not there is any depolicing, or what's more commonly referred to sometimes as the Ferguson effect. And then finally, like the Chief was saying, we're including 3 districts in an effort to try and assess the impact of the cameras in as much variation as possible with respect to different demographics, different economics, different geographies throughout the county. And then finally, just on a personal note, I want to commend Fairfax County Police for taking the time to actually do the research and putting in the effort to see what the impacts of cameras are, because our best estimates suggest that about a third of all law enforcement agencies currently have cameras or are in the process of cameraing up as we speak, and yet hardly any agencies take the time to see what the impacts of the cameras are before putting cameras out there. So I think that's a very good thing, and we look forward to working with the department and seeing what the results are.
This question for Chief. I know the community all excited about the possibility of the cameras. How about the officers themselves? Are they excited they have to wear cameras?
They absolutely are. You know, I can't say it's 100%, but it's close to it. We have in-car video already out there. And in today's environment where the profession is under attack, the officers welcome body-worn cameras to show the community, especially here in Fairfax, we are professional at all times. Angela.
How involved were police unions in coming up with this program?
They have been involved directly with me and with the policy development and the operations. I also maintain transparency internally, and as the leader of a large organization, I need to also have feedback from the midnight shift officers and especially the 5 employee group leaders, so that they're directly involved and part of the program. Yes.
There was an accident on the Legion Bridge, so we were late, sorry.
Okay.
Just a couple of things. Did you look at MPD Study? They had a program, pilot program as well, and I believe that their pilot program showed a result that their use of force did not go down based on the use of cameras, which is sort of an interesting outcome. Do you have any anticipation of what your study may or may not show? Based on that information and others?
Right, good question. I have read their study, and I've worked with the professors from American University to use my knowledge, skills, and abilities in my other hat, which has a little bit of academics in it, to understand how valid was their study and how can we improve upon that study, also one in Boston, and have the highest levels of academic rigor. So I have no preconceptions or any desired outcomes at the front. We're doing a pilot project with open minds, and we're going to measure this with the highest levels of academic rigor. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a policy, and that policy is effective, and officers shall be held accountable to that policy. And those studies have nuances in them that I don't agree with from the level of getting to the highest levels of academic rigor. And the staff from American University are well respected globally, and that's why I brought them in, and especially the community. President Annan is also part of a large stakeholder group that will get briefings in real time during the pilot project. How is the policy working? Do we need to change something? Did we miss something? And operationally, do we need to change something? So it's going to be fluid, and the community and academic professors are going to hold us accountable to make sure we do this at the highest levels, so we can make that informed decision with the Board of Supervisors sometime in the fall.
Can I ask, and then if I can follow up?
Go ahead. If I might also address that. So I also did read that study, and we had a couple of concerns about what it was being, the message that it was sending. So first of all, what happened in DC, it doesn't necessarily reflect what's going on here in Fairfax County. That study came at the tail end of over 20 years of reform of the DC Police Department. The DC environment is also a lot different because there are literally cameras everywhere. So it's likely that the officers are used to being filmed basically everywhere they go. Not the same here in Fairfax. And the third point I'd like to make is that if we're going to make the case that we shouldn't have cameras because it didn't change police behavior, well then we should also get rid of dash cams. We should also get rid of cameras at 7-Elevens and everything else. Like, cameras just show the facts. So if it's a matter of just wanting to see the facts, regardless of how it changes behavior, then I think this is still an excellent idea.
And Chief, if I could follow up, and I apologize if this has come up, but the DC City Council came up with a very detailed way, and they worked with the police on how the public would be able to see this video. Where does that stand with either the Board of Supervisors or within your own department as to when the public may be able to see some of this footage?
All you need to do is look at my practices as Chief of Police and transparency. I have released videos as soon as they were no longer of evidentiary value. That still stands. So as soon as the video is no longer needed as evidence, I will release it, and I have. And that practice stands. And you've reported on that. You know that. So no different.
But do you need a policy, though, in place?
We already have a policy because I have in-car video. We have other videos. I've released videos.
You're going by the in-car video policy that you have.
This is, as Chantel mentioned earlier, this combines all our policies. But the release of information, that's me as chief, and that's not going to change. We're going to remain transparent as we have over the last couple of years. A question in the back.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you to reiterate when officers are going to be expected to turn on the cameras, and what about privacy for individuals if they don't want to be on camera? How does that all work?
The basic premise is when an officer thinks there is criminal activity afoot, reasonable suspicion, clearly you need to turn it on. If you obviously have probable cause, you need to turn it on. Routine items such as conducting a traffic stop, the in-car video is on, the body-worn camera is on, and the nuance here, as a pilot project, is the privacy issue. So if someone is having a mental health episode, and we have a diversion first program, we want to take that person to the Merrifield Center for crisis intervention and get treatment versus arrest. Clearly, that's something that we don't want through the Virginia Freedom of Information Act to then be releasable to where someone is having a mental health episode, and we don't want that broadcast, someone's loved one having that episode. So on a case-by-case basis, clearly, as we go through this pilot project, that's a critical piece of policy of turn on, off, but also when do we delete and not retain. So that's what this pilot project is, to get right to the ground level, and that's where the community stakeholders, the mental health advocates, for example, will help us make certain that we protect privacy. Clearly, privacy in schools is another big issue. That's why the school resource officers will not be part of this project, but again, the study will help us create that dialogue if we go to a full-time program. So again, this is why it's a pilot project, because we want to get to the full answer and really fine-tune, and as mentioned, go find another police department in this country that has taken the efforts like this county has to make sure if we do go to a full-time program, not only the cost impact, but the policy and the expectation in community is right.
What about a routine traffic stop? The officer turns on the camera, pulls the person in. What if the person doesn't want to be on camera? Can a person say not be on camera?
So a traffic stop is either reasonable suspicion, criminal activity is afoot, or they've committed a traffic violation. We already record that with the in-car video to hold us accountable for that legitimate reason of being there. Any complaints against the officer, it's live. And the purpose of this press briefing is to inform our community that we will continue to do this. It's just a body-worn camera. We already do it with in-car video. We need to hold each other accountable. So if there's allegations against an officer for rudeness during a traffic stop, we are recording. We're live.
So if, say I'm pulled over, I think the officer's been rude, I can call and make a complaint. Can I see that video?
That will also be introduced through the interview process. So we gotta, on a case-by-case basis, make a decision. Do we go to the videotape or not? Depending on the level of the allegation, do we want to conduct the interview first from both the officer and the community member and see if there is a conflict in the statements made, and then eventually show the videotape? I can tell you, on an officer-involved shooting, on a case-by-case basis, working with the Commonwealth Attorney, that's another critical decision. Do I show the officer what transpired or not? When do I show it? How many days should I wait? Realizing in that particular situation it could induce trauma to both an officer or a community member. So again, everything will be a case-by-case basis, but I will be the ultimate decision maker on that. And this study will help us fine-tune those decision processes and hopefully help the profession.
But will there be any policy in place to let the community members see the video, or is that something you will decide?
We do have internal policies in internal affairs, and internal affairs reports directly to me. And if it's not of evidentiary value, just like my release policy. So in a nutshell, if I'm going to release that video, I have no problem staff showing it to the complainant, but at some point they're going to see it. It's just a matter of, do we think someone is lying? Do we need to hold on to the video, get all the statements, and then say, okay, now look at this. Here's your statement, here's this, whether it's the officer or the community member, case-by-case basis. To have a blanket policy won't work, but it will be released.
Can I ask you another question about your decision to release video? Yes, you guys have released a lot of video. What you're saying is that you may not release it if there's evidentiary value to that video, right?
That's the basic premise. However, a question earlier, depending on the nature of the event in the community, we got to go to the weight of the transparency, informing the community of what needs to be known. There's unfortunate events in this world, and it's tragic, but sometimes we're going to have to err on the side of transparency and release videos, and I've been doing that.
And that's what you did in the case on the Parkway, GW Parkway?
I've been doing that and trying to, strive to be better for the community transparency. So this project will help us grow in transparency.
Chief, I have a question about going into a home. MPD has a very specific policy on theirs as far as what the public may see once they enter a home. Do you have, as your pilot program, focused on that as well, as to what can be done once you're inside someone's home?
Our policy should be available to all you, but I'm going to have Chantel. She is a subject matter expert, and she could go into great detail how we came up with the turn on, off inside homes. Chantel?
That's a good question, thank you. So if it is a service, there is no crime in progress, and officers, okay, I'm going to use an example. They go to Mr. Smith's home, and it is merely a service call. So it's, I'm going to use the easiest one, one of the more common ones, a domestic dispute. A husband and wife are just arguing. So they call the police because they're sick of each other or whatever reason. They want us to come and kind of mediate for them. So we arrive, we knock on the door. They're letting us into their house on consent basis, but then they see the camera and they'll say, whoa, I don't want you in my house on a consent base. If it is just based off of a service call, then the officer will turn it off, stop recording, and proceed as they normally would. Any time during that interaction, if there becomes some signs of, oh, this is a criminal, obviously this is domestic violence, this is, something else, or there's going to be a use of force, officers will then once again start recording, and they'll have that last 30-second buffer. But if they're inside somebody's home and there's no crime in progress, officers are asked not to record. They will not record, and they will proceed as they have for the last umpteen years that we've been out on the streets.
But they have to be asked not to record?
Correct.
Let me just add to that, because through our training, we will what if these types of scenarios, but as a chief of police, I want my officers to be safe. We can't say, time out, I need to shut this off, when use of force by someone else, the aggressor toward the officer, is coming. If there is time and it is safe, clearly we'll try to protect privacy rights. But there will be times when we are recording and we get involved in events. The officer needs to be vigilant and focused, and that's where the study comes in. Do we then have this recording? It's no value after the event, and we delete it. And then that opens up another issue. Suppose a complaint later on is lodged to the civilian review panel, and I have to explain why we deleted the video. So that's really why we're doing this pilot project. There's many nuances here, and this will provide us the opportunity to work with the community so we all understand on, off, delete, or not delete. Angela?
For deleting video, is that going to be your call?
For Freedom of Information Act requests?
Yeah, just for when, since you said that sometimes you might decide that a video can't be used, or if the community member doesn't want it to be kept, would that be your decision?
Under the Code of Virginia, it is my decision as the agency head, and in accordance with county policy and the county attorney's FOIA staff.
Who will have access to delete these videos? Is there just a small group of people, or can anybody's system delete these videos?
Tightly controlled, like many other systems. I, as the chief of police, don't even have permission. That's how controlled the environment is. And for this pilot project, that needs to be my decision with my staff. I'm going to be informed on these real time as we navigate through the pilot project, because eventually if we go to a full-time program, that will be delegated, but we need to have a standard operating procedure that the community and the police department all agree upon for transparency. But for right now, it's my decision.
Chief, I think maybe this question is for the commander. During a commission of a crime, are there any reasonable expectation of privacy by innocent bystanders?
So we have excellent redaction and blur on the with Axon. They have which will go through our FOIA compliance specialist. So they can redact things within the system, which is excellent. And I just wanted to mention real quick, in the policy, there is no deletion. It is followed by the library. The state mandates the amount of times. There's nobody that's going to delete. So it's 60 days is the minimum something will be kept based off of what it's categorized. So just so that everybody understands.
And that's a good point. We're going to follow the law, but after that retention period, that's my decision. Any other questions?
So are you going to look at every piece of video and decide whether to just keep it or not? Like how does, you'll have a...
We already do this with in-car video, so clearly during the retention period, you know, it's kind of finesse. You know, that's an issue that's now pending in the Supreme Court for our license plate readers, as many of you know. So awaiting the outcome of that. Does that have an impact? If we don't have a retention period, obviously begs the question, is in-car video body-worn cameras even worth the expenditure on behalf of the taxpayers? But 60 days obviously is one period of time, and if something develops within that 60 days that we need then reach back and lock it down as evidence, then it becomes evidence, and then there's another schedule to retain the evidence. And that also drives the cost impact of the program, because the storage of the evidence is large. Big cost. Putting it onto the cloud or a server. Again, the pilot project will help us then scope that storage cost. So yet to be answered questions as we navigate forward. Angela?
I guess I was just wondering, since you mentioned the civilian review panel, I was wondering like what kind of access they and the independent police auditor will have to the footage.
They already have access to our in-car video footage, our helicopter footage. You saw that in the case a year ago in the Herndon officer-involved shooting. I released our helicopter video. It's part of the auditor's report. The auditor had access to that. And if we have a case that is before the civilian review panel, they have access to the case. And that includes video right now. So this does not change the practice.
Okay.
Do you have dedicated officers? Like what type of staffing changes had to be made to manage this program?
Sure. Major Quinn talk about staffing changes, mainly in our IT bureau, and this is just kind of, I guess, a small staff for the small pilot project. But Major Quinn.
Thank you, Chief. We bring in some limited term employees, both on the ITB side or Information Technology Bureau. So we're going to have 24/7 coverage, technical support to support the program throughout its duration. And then we're also bringing in some folks who are going to be assigned to the Media Relations Bureau, and that is where we currently process FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act, as well as digital video evidence for the Commonwealth Attorney, and then also internal law enforcement requests. In addition, we have a second lieutenant assigned to the project, and once the project has fully launched as of March 13th, and to be clear, by the evening of March 1st, we should have in the neighborhood of 200 cameras on the street. And we will have all of our workforce trained by March 13th, and those are the makeup dates and so forth. So you may have a few stragglers, but the majority of the program is going to be fully implemented by the 1st. And we'll have a second lieutenant who will assume program management duties for the duration of the project as well.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief, could you take a couple of questions that are on two different topics?
Not at this podium, but I'll stand by in the lobby.
Sounds good.
Thank you, guys. We also have a camera on hand too, if you want to get your hands on it and see it and try it on. And we have a vest that you guys can put on with it and try it after. So that's about it. We appreciate you being here. Thank you.